Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this first in a two-part series here at WBUR City Space. This is Education Now and Then, projections on post-COVID learning. We're streaming live tonight from WBUR's City Space YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, we do encourage you to subscribe so that we can notify you whenever we go live. So I think when it comes to this last year, if there's one thing that pretty much everyone can say is that it's been really tough. There's been a lot of loss. There's been loss of life. There's been loss of jobs and income, loneliness between quarantines and social distancing. There's been changes in the way we learn. We've had to learn new technologies. We've had to use new technologies. And also internet access, Zoom fatigue, everything has just piled on. But within this crisis, there has been an opportunity to experiment. Some of the ways the pandemic forced teachers and students to learn this last year have not been so great, but on the same token, others have been unexpectedly rewarding. All of this week, WBUR has been examining some of those unexpected lessons, and tonight we'll be looking at that even more. To begin this discussion, we've gathered some insights from 5 students from across the state about this past year. We'll be hearing from them throughout the evening, actually, but let's quickly meet them in a video where we introduce them. Get that started.
I was going to be learning from home. Maybe I just would not believe it. It just really is unprecedented. Hi, my name is Declan Collins, and I'm a sophomore at Holliston High School. I'm over the moon to go back full time. I really miss seeing my friends that are in the other cohort. I really haven't seen them this whole year, and that's really tough.
Hi, my name is Ismael Mendez. I'm 16. I go to Charlestown High School, and I'm in 10th grade. At the start, I was doing bad, but then I started to work my way into it, and I adjusted to the remote learning, and I felt like it would be more beneficial for me to stay online, so I just stick with that.
At least I know I'm home and I'm safe, so I'm grateful for that as well. My name is Christelle Charles. I'm in 9th grade, and I go to Codman Academy. I'm a person that doesn't like to learn online because it's like I like seeing someone and interacting with them, and it's like, especially when I see your face, like I can understand how you're feeling, your emotions.
A lot of administration and my teachers and stuff were understanding through these hard times, but I don't think they really understood what it was like being a teenager and having the school year taken away from you. Hi, my name is Angelique Cromartie. I go to Madison Park and I'm a 10th grader.
Looking back at where we've come, it's really remarkable, I think. Hi, I'm Lincoln Anabali. I'm a senior at Natick High School and I'm 18 years old. Grade-wise, it was very difficult to maintain grades or to do good in a class, but I think we really came together, and when someone needed help or assistance, we helped them out and we got through it.
I mean, looking back at this last year, it feels like in a lot of ways it's going to be hard to go back to how school was in the before times, as they say. And, tonight we're going to be talking about how we've been changed by this last year and what schools should look like in response. So joining us to talk about this live tonight are 4 panelists. We've got Ulana Ainsworth, an inclusion kindergarten teacher and teacher leader at the Curtis Guild Elementary School in East Boston. Elijah Hextall, he is the principal at the Dudley Street Neighborhood Charter School. Brittany Jenny is an ESL teacher at New Bedford High School, and Kathleen Smith, who is the interim superintendent for Weymouth Public Schools. Welcome, everyone. So let's dig into this a little bit more. And before we get started, I do want to say that we want to hear from you guys watching from home as well. We'll be using the YouTube chat box to hear from everyone tonight, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code #education. And so the first thing I would like to hear from the audience is, using one word or phrase, what's the most challenging part about this past year for you? Again, to tell us, if you want, you can go to slido.com using the code education, or just leave that comment in the chat box here in YouTube. And quick note that we are taking some audience questions tonight for the panelists, and if there's time, I'll try to work a few of those into the program so you can use the same modes to get those to us too. So as we'll move to the panelists while we're waiting to hear from the audience. And I want to know, what was the most challenging part of all of this for you? Alana, why don't we start with you?
Hi. I feel like as an early childhood educator, I teach, 5 and 6 years old, and one of the biggest challenges was, how are students playing with each other? How are we socializing students with each other? It's such a big part of early childhood education. And so we had to come up with inventive ways for how students can interact with each other, through Zoom, and have breakout rooms where we can play with each other and have play dates and really build in that language, because that's such a fundamental piece of early childhood and super important. And I had a lot of different struggles around that, and introducing families and meeting new families too. But I feel like that was the best part, but the biggest challenge. And now that we're back in schools, you're seeing some of that language, and kids are, oh, I remember that toy. You have that toy, and so do I. So that's really exciting to see. But that was a huge challenges. How do you play? How do you get kids to socialize with each other? They're 4 and 5 years old.
Oh, I can only imagine, especially at that age. Kathleen, why don't we shift over to you? What was one of the most challenging parts for you especially as like a district leader?
Well, at the time when the pandemic started, I was actually as superintendent in the Salem Public Schools. And looking at that, and now transferring to the Weymouth Public Schools, I can say in both districts, it was truly building a strong culture. And that was with all stakeholders. So, taking the time to thank the custodians for the work that they were doing, the parents for supporting those youngsters that were learning remotely, especially last spring, making sure our teachers had the materials they needed. And it was almost like, we've got this. We're going to get through that. And that has been in both districts, continual communication, letting people know that we're all in this together. We're going to work together. We're going to continue to communicate every aspect of what we were doing, putting the kids at the forefront of what we were doing.
Great. Elijah, what about you? I know you are also new to school leadership. What was one of your biggest challenges this year?
Yeah, I believe that I'm going to echo a little bit of what Ulana said, that building community is really important in schools. Kathleen alluded to this a little bit, but I think like independent of the culture, independent of like teaching kids social skills, especially the younger ones, but actually just recognizing school as a place of like a part of your community. I'm in a place where I am a new leader to the school, so I stepped in during the pandemic, and so had to learn and meet all of my staff virtually. Most of my staff I had never seen teach until up in person until March of this year. And so there was a number of challenges in thinking about how I could connect with them, gain trust, and then just support them in a real way that is very difficult when you cannot connect when you're passing by in the hallway, when you can stop by in the morning, when you see each other in the parking lot. I think I took a lot of that for granted. And then coming in as a new leader, it was extremely challenging to think about. I have to set my time aside to be able to build community with all the constituents, families, staff members, students, many of which I can't even get close to. And so I saw that as the largest challenge coming in.
Yeah, that connection piece I feel like that was universally a challenge, but I can only imagine when you're trying to team build that just makes it that much harder. Brittany, what about you?
Well, coming from the perspective of teaching ESL to students in high school, there have been a lot of challenges, especially that sense of, students feeling connected to each other, and also having a place where they can, authentically practice their English. That was really challenging. I know Ulana mentioned, using breakout rooms, that works sometimes, but then when they're in person, it's like, well, got to keep distance. So how do we do this? And so that became a challenge. And then even just the practical things that you wouldn't otherwise think of. Students are learning a language. And part of the way that they understand when I'm speaking is by seeing the way my lips move. So wearing a mask makes that challenging. It muffles everybody's voices. And so there have just been so many little things too that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And having a lot of my students too who are, 16, 17, 18 years old and are working all hours of the night, it becomes even more challenging, I think, in a virtual context to keep them engaged, and keep them feeling like, well, even though we may not be in the building all the time, we are still here together. And so it's been, lots of different challenges this year.
Yeah, I can imagine the hybrid learning also just, I can't imagine trying to juggle that. I want to get some student voices in here. We're going to play another video because our students did have some feedback on what some of the most challenging aspects of this year was. So here is what they had to say about this last year.
It was really scary just seeing the total transition of when I was passing, I was a good student, and then now my grades are reflecting something completely different.
I think being on the screen all day is just kind of exhausting. I mean, this might sound kind of ridiculous, but when you're at home, you're sort of less alert, you're more comfortable. So I think that sort of lends itself to a bit of complacency.
You can't focus when you have, 50 tabs open and a teacher speaking, and you have a YouTube tab right next to it. That's a lot more enticing than hearing someone go on about something that you might not be completely interested in.
And being focused is also hard because it's there's at home, some people might not have a good living environment. For example, me, I live around here, so it's there's always some type of police car or fire truck. And it's I can't be oh, can you repeat that please? Because one, I would say that a lot, and two, it's not fair to the teacher because then she has a whole other class, there's other students, so it's not only about me.
Yeah, it feels like the big theme that came out of all of those interviews and even pre-interviews with more students that we talked to for this, it was just this big challenge to focus. And for a variety of reasons, it depended on what kind of situation they were coming from or dealing with. So I'm going to throw this first question to our teachers on the panel. When it came to trying to get students engaged outside of just not physically being together, did you have any special tricks or how challenging was that to try to get over some of those issues, kind of like what Christelle was mentioning there in the end, a loud background environment, maybe it was sirens or maybe loud siblings. Did you encounter any of that and what did you do about it? Brittany, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I definitely have a lot of students who have very noisy background situations at their homes. Sometimes, maybe having 3 or 4 siblings also doing online learning with them. So I was able to secure a bunch of the ESL teachers. We were able to get headphones with little microphones and everything to give to students. So when I would notice that every time certain students unmuted, all I could hear was screaming, crying, lots of things going on, I would reach out to them apart and say, hey, listen, when you come in for your 2 days next week, I'm going to give you a pair of headphones and hopefully that will help. So that was one small thing that we were able to do to help out a little.
A little bit of a tech hack there. What about you, Ulana?
We were also able to give them headphones, which was really helpful. So awesome. I echo that, Brittany. But I feel like I'm going to be completely honest here. I was Blippi. I was Mr. Rogers. I was Steve from Blue's Clues to keep these kids focused on me. I'd be like, and we're going here, and look over there, and let's look in the dirt, and let's go look in the ground, and I'm walking to the beach, and let's look and see what's outside. And, the tone changes, and everything's big and flashy, and we had movement breaks every 25 minutes because I can't even sit down that long. So it was a lot to keep the kids engaged because I wanted them focused on me and not all the other distractions in their household. So I was all over the place. And when my friends and families heard me teach, they were like, you sound like Blippi. And I was like, yes, because that's what the kids need to pay attention to because I'm competing with the YouTube channels, all of the other videos that they could be watching, even the TV might be on. So I'm competing with all that noise and I want to make sure they're focused on me. So I was larger than life and a big time actor. I put on my actor hat.
That's amazing. I mean, how does that compare to like quote unquote normal teaching of kindergarten classes? Is there some of that? Was this just heightened? How would you describe that?
There's some of that in normal kindergarten times, but I feel as though I was over the top extra to get them to pay attention to me. Whereas like I could sing a song when we're in school, like 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, and it could be quiet and mellow and calming. Whereas to get their attention, I'd be like, hey, what's going on? And they would go, hey, what's going on? Back. So it had to be bigger, more energy, more volume, more excitement.
What were some of the biggest frustrations that came with some of those classes? I would imagine that took a lot of energy, but was there something that just kept being a problem throughout this time?
I so a big problem was making sure some students had a way to get online in the morning because they are young and their siblings might have been in high school trying to take their classes, and some students were with other family members. It was really hard to make sure students were online and stayed online or stayed in front of the computer. That was really, really challenging because their families were out working. Not every family could have someone sitting next to the student. So that was really hard during that time. And that was a persistent problem, was getting kids on and making sure they stayed on. And it wasn't something that they could do by themselves because they wanted to be there and they wanted to be connected, but sometimes it just wouldn't happen because the support wasn't there all the time.
One thing that we've talked about on my desk, at least, is or we hear a lot about, is learning loss this year. I would imagine just there's a lot of effort that goes into checking in about things that aren't academics, rightfully so. But there are losses we should acknowledge beyond just the academics this year. I mean, 17,000 people have died with the coronavirus, according to the state, and many people have lost their jobs or had their hours cut or just had to do a lot of different things to make ends meet. And so I want to turn the conversation to some of our school leaders here to see, what was it like to see families go through this, and how did you respond? Elijah, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think one, it was, I don't want to underplay it, it was just incredibly difficult in every aspect. I think, we spend a lot of time with teachers trying to work with them to figure out how they could prioritize, what standards they're teaching, where kids were coming in at, and how to best and most effectively, the needle, especially with our youngest ones, and equip their families to support them to do the same, in the same way that Ulana was talking, where there's a caregiver that is equally as responsible for supporting that child in their education as the teacher would be normally during the day. So that there was a lot of work there. The Boston Plan for Excellence governs our charter as a school, and we worked collaboratively together to create a COVID relief fund. And so we were able to raise funds to support additional Chromebooks, technology, and internet connectivity hotspots and things of that nature that could fill in some of the gaps, and also be just a source of funding that could support our families and whatever needs came up. And so we definitely had families who, had job loss, or had families who had job loss, and then families who had to move in together because of they needed to support one another in their situations. And so depending on whatever that need was, we tried to just be ready to be able to tackle that, whether that was an emotional support, whether that was a physical support, or whether that was a financial support. And so I think that we as a school adopted a customer service attitude, and we had to figure out how to leverage the adults in different ways. And so, myself and my dean, the first couple of weeks, we were kind of Chromebook delivery and repairmen, and that was our job. And that's what needed to happen at that time. And then, as we moved into hybrid instruction and things like that, we needed to teach and change our role. And so every adult in this building, and I wish I would have done this sooner and better for our teachers, had to figure out where they could fill in to make sure that it was a better experience for the students. And so I think adults pitching in, literally just thinking about financially how we can support folks, and then making sure that people have what they needed both to do the academic side of things, but also to get through the crisis that we all had to handle.
Do you feel like the size of your school played a role in how quickly maybe you might be able to get like funding rolled out or those requests out? Yeah, do you think that impacted things at all?
100%. I think that we are a citywide school, right? And so, but a heavy majority of our student population and families are in the Roxbury neighborhood in Dorchester, and so we are pretty close, and we have a decently small size school, and so I think that automatically amplifies our ability to connect with our families and with the students and what they need. Our teachers, I can't underscore this enough, did a fantastic job of just elevating their relationships with families in a way that they quite frankly had no choice to do in order to be able to feel effective at their job. And because of that, I think we actually felt much closer eventually as we rolled out and got through these things, through good times and bad, right? Through the Zoom bombing and through internet connectivity and getting kicked off, and families figuring out schedules if they have students in multiple schools and things of that nature. And so it was a lot of collaborative work that had to happen. And because of that, I think that it just kind of made the needs apparent more quickly because of our teacher relationships, and therefore our ability to think about what our response was as well.
Great. And actually, when it comes to, that's a good segue for my next question. Kathleen, we'll pose this one to you. When it comes to family engagement, how did you address family engagement during the pandemic, and how might that have changed?
Well, I have to tell you, in the past couple of weeks, I thought it was important coming on here that I brought together about 25 teachers from the Weymouth Public Schools, because I wanted to hear from staff exactly some of the changes that may have taken place. All of the things that I've heard here tonight are echoed, I'm sure, in districts across this Commonwealth. But interesting enough, one of the things that came out of this, I loved hearing parent-teacher conferences. Although it was Zoom virtually, it was almost 100% of the parents being able to access an opportunity to spend that time with the teacher and to hear about that support for their children. Same thing for those parents with special needs youngsters and IEP meetings. It almost took away that anxiety when you're coming in and you're sitting with 5 or 6 educators hearing about your child. You were kind of in your own space and able to be in your own environment, and the conversations were very rich as far as how we support those youngsters. But again, family engagement was heightened to the point of, again, there were parents were in their living rooms, were in their homes. They were understanding the important role that they played. It was important for them to, again, connect with the teachers, reach out, have those communications that truly is just really good teaching. Our teachers are in front of students, when you look at it, for 180 days during the school year. Those children are with us. They share stories from home. We hear about the successes, the failures. So this absolutely put teachers, because as you know, with your EdEval system, family engagement is one of those things. When I was a superintendent in Brockton, I would hear and they would put things in, well, I sent a note home, and that really was the evidence that they put together. This is so much richer and meaningful and supports the child in such a valid way during this critical time, to move those kids forward. So I would say it's at an all-time high. It's something, again, I know myself and superintendents across our Commonwealth and across the nation, are spending that extra time, as I said, whether it's newsletters, whether it's, phone calls home. I always did a Sunday message to the parents to also tell them you're doing a great job. We're here to help you. Is it food insecurity? Is it, as Elijah said, do we need to come out there and send tech people? And they were welcoming. We had bus drivers when we were delivering food across the city, making sure that we had packets in the beginning for students to make sure that they could engage. And I have to say, Carrie, the one thing, and I hope you let me plug this, is what an advocate I was for equity in education. And nobody was happier than when the Student Opportunity Act passed in September of 2019, which said students across this Commonwealth all would have the opportunities that students in maybe wealthier districts had. And this was really brought to the light at this point here, when on March 13th, we had to pivot in a very different way to make sure all kids had access to technology, all kids had internet connectivity, all kids were ready to be able to come in and learn. So again, I think we were ahead of the curveball then, and we're certainly headed in the right direction.
Oh, school funding is definitely something I want to talk more about later on in the program. So definitely following up on that. That's a very good point, though. I do want to shift gears a little bit. One thing that we heard a lot from students and teachers, and I mean, pretty universally, actually, now that I say it that way, you know, mental health, emotional health during the pandemic was something that pretty much everyone struggled with. It was something that the students in our program had told us, and we have a video of them describing how that was for them during the pandemic. So we'll see what they had to say.
My mom and my grandmother lost their job. They got laid off during the pandemic in the beginning, and a couple of my friends and their family caught it. So it was very scary and just a hard time in the beginning. I didn't get it or be physically impacted by it, but emotionally and mentally it really did drain me. And at one point I was very depressed. So I feel like my teachers didn't really take that into consideration, or really anybody.
It's been a little bit rocky, a little bit up and down due to COVID. Online learning, at first it was a little bit difficult for me, but I found out how to adjust to it.
I think for me personally, next year is just going to be finding a balance between succeeding in school and maintaining sort of a healthy mental health outside of it, because next year it's going to be a tough year. It's going to be stressful.
Teachers, I feel did a very good job of trying to support students emotionally and academically, because it was something that was really challenging to do when you can't physically be there with someone. You don't know what's going on with their lives or how they're doing.
I feel like COVID has helped teachers understand students feel this way too. Students have to go through life too. It's not only them. It's not only them because they have a job, they have a family, only them have to do everything. But it's kids, they also have their own problems.
Such a great point Christelle makes there at the end, that the students really were struggling with their own problems in the background as well during all of this. So before I shift to the panelists to reflect on some of that, I do want to mention that WBUR will be taking a deeper dive into how the pandemic and all of the quarantining and isolation impacted youth mental health. That's going to be in an upcoming series called Pandemic Generation, so keep your ears open for that when it runs on June 21st through the 25th. So Elijah, I want to turn to you. How would you say that mental health needs for your students and also your staff? How did that change for your school throughout the year?
I think with any school year, there's ebbs and flows of morale, of feeling of fatigue. I think that's just the natural state of a school year. This year was particularly difficult. And I think that there were different points in the year where folks would probably feel a lot more energized, a lot more like they're quite frankly, their jobs are sustainable than in previous years, especially for our more experienced teachers. And so I think it fluctuated throughout. I think the pieces that I saw is that when there were successes, just like at any other time, that's when there was an uptick and kind of more hope and the many challenges and obstacles that teachers face. And then when we're troubleshooting, if there was a student that you were really having a hard time to connect with, or they were having a hard time with their internet, or just they have a few siblings or cousins and they're all staying with grandma because someone has to work, right? In those types of situations, I think that that was hard for teachers because they felt handcuffed in a way that they never had to deal with before, in terms of just I'm going to go do everything I can, but I can't physically get to this person. And so when we ran into those walls, I think I saw the staff morale dip a little bit. And quite frankly, we just tried to attack that head on and do as much as possible to support staff, make sure that they felt appreciated, and quite frankly, just tell them this is brand new. This is the hardest thing you've ever had to do, all of us. And we are going to uphold each other and get through this. And so I think the collective piece, and I keep bringing this up, and I probably will keep bringing it up throughout any question, is if we don't strive to build that community, and if we didn't focus on that, our teachers wouldn't have made it through this year. We still got a few weeks to go, so we're still making it. But I think that has been really helpful. They're rocks for one another. And so when one person's down, we have to uplift them.
Well, I want to follow up to like what types of things did you guys do as a school to make the teachers feel appreciated and noticed and things like that?
Yeah, I think personally, I think just like recognition goes a long way. Both just like very quick and passing. I think just thinking about like what evaluation looks like and what that means and what coaching it looks like. I think we had to take a look at kind of how we're approaching that, especially during these times with a supportive stance. We did virtual happy hours. We did like the events, right, so where we can just like step away, come together. I gave my teachers gifts before every single holiday break, and it was a priority. An interesting precedent to set, I think, as a new leader to the school, but I think something that was meaningful to them and that I want to continue to do, because it's one of the hardest jobs in the world, and it was the hardest job in the world this year, and so I want to make sure that they know that, and they did it, and we're going to continue doing it. And so I think it's everything from just like, I need to tell you that you're doing okay. I also need to let you know that like we're figuring this out and we're going to figure it out together, and the community will do it collectively. And then like, yes, let's actually spend some time together, while still trying to get away from the screen occasionally.
A difficult balance there, but yeah. Brittany, I want to turn to you and talk a little bit about what you saw among like your students' emotional and mental health, and like what did you see first of all in terms of like how that came through in the classroom? Did that impact your classroom, and how did you work through that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think we knew, I mean, last spring when everything first started, I think that a lot of us did a really good job at saying, okay, let's just not stress too much about academics right now. Let's just be checking in with kids and families constantly and making sure they're okay and seeing what they need. And then September rolled around and it became, okay, well, we still need to do that, but we also need to start picking up with academics again. And so something that we did in the ESL department at the high school was we sort of redesigned our first unit of the year. And we made a good portion of it all about stress management and how to handle stress and how to prioritize what you need to get done, and time management. So that was one way that we tried to address some of that mental health aspect. And I also think something that I learned throughout the year was that if I was going to build meaningful relationships with my students, I was going to have to work 3 times as hard, because it is so much harder to build a relationship over a screen. And especially, I mean, high school students, it's cameras off the whole time, which I also understand, because a lot of them don't feel comfortable with their classmates maybe seeing their living environments. So I think I learned once students started coming back back in person full time, students dealing with certain, challenges, I started to realize, wow, students may not feel, we're in March, we're in April, but students may not feel like they have that connection with me yet, still, because of the fact that we've been looking at each other through a screen all year. And we haven't been able to have those kind of just spur of the moment, authentic, one-on-one conversations. So it's resulted in kind of me having to work extra hard to build those relationships with students, or to at least make sure that they have an adult that they feel they can talk to about whatever it is that they're going through.
Yeah, the blank screens was a big thing that came up among the students. I know, well, Christelle in our videos had mentioned several times, like, I don't know what half of my classmates are going to look like, because everyone's cameras were off. So that's, yeah, that is very, very hard. When it comes to helping students process, especially as we move into next year, and Kathleen, I'm going to turn to you. This is that funding question here. The Biden administration is proposing, including an extra $1 billion to help K through 12 schools hire more counselors. Do you think that that's enough to help schools and students get off to a good track next year?
Carrie, I'm never going to say it's enough when we talk about our future and our children. But I will say this, in looking at, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, and very quickly, ESSER 1 was March of 2020, ESSER 2, December 2020. And all of this was needed just to get us up and running. And certainly all of us know what that was used for. Equipment, technology, sanitation, fogger, I mean, things that we never could have envisioned if you go back just 6 months from March of 2020. When you look at ESSER 3, we are now, and this is the Biden administration, being very strategic and thoughtful. And I have to tell you, I had an opportunity back about a month ago in Weymouth to sit with Speaker of the House, Ron Mariano, who represents this district. He was here along with, I believe, Senator O'Connor, Representative Murphy, and there was a beam raising for a beautiful new middle school going up in Weymouth. And we had the opportunity to sit down and started to talk. And I'll never forget the speaker saying, this is a once in a generation opportunity. And you've looked at the figures in many of our cities and towns, and it's money we never could have thought of. And yet at this point here, we need to be strategic. We have until October to put forward our plans. We know what those monies are looking like, and really bring your community together and talk about, because it is one-time money at this point, what impact can that have in the district and for our students going forward? Is it looking at CTE programs? Is it looking at opportunities, technology, robotics? Is it looking at curriculum? Many of us are doing curriculum audits, making sure our children see themselves in the curriculum that we're delivering to our teachers. Is it professional development? How do we recover, from this pandemic? You talked about social and emotional learning. Our teachers are feeling, and I've watched teachers break down truly in tears, saying, I didn't get to all the material that I wanted to get to. I don't feel like I prepared my little third graders to go to fourth grade because I was paying attention to those social and emotional learning needs, which are so critical. So this money, again, and I would caution everybody in every district, work with your stakeholders, your school committee, your town councils, et cetera, to make sure that you're strategic. And as Speaker Mariano said, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity that you will see this kind of money.
The addition of extra funds for schools, I know, is something that that there's a lot of thought around how to put this to good use, and it's something that has been appreciated, I'm sure, among school leaders. And maybe saying that's a silver lining might be a bit of a stretch, but in this whole chaotic kind of experience of the pandemic, there have been some silver linings, or at least things that we've learned that we might want to carry forward into the future. And so this was something that this is a question we posed to the students in our panel. So we've got one more video, or another video rather, and here's what the students had to say about the bright spots that came along with the pandemic.
I get to decide what time I have to wake up. I don't have to wake up super early to go to school, and everything is online. So if I didn't get to finish something in one class, I can always come back to it later because it's just right there.
Oh, what about, did teachers have office hours or anything like that?
Yes, they do now, and it was a lot more helpful doing it online than in person before. So,
why do you think that is?
Just because after school, I would have to get home, help my mom clean up, or I would have to go pick up my cousins. But doing it at home online, it was easier to, I need help with this. I'm already here, and my teachers are right there in my pocket. So
I feel like I can say that I've learned that teachers really do try to cooperate and help the students be engaged no matter where they are.
I mean, it definitely took time to kind of know how I learn and how I should best organize my stuff and study. But I think that's definitely something that I'm going to take to college and later on in life, because I think I know myself better as a student now, and I know kind of how I function best.
Yeah, so many different and surprising responses from the students. I think one of my favorites was, I've got my teacher in my pocket now. Or just being able to private DM your teacher if you have a question, rather than that social pressure of raising your hand, was huge for a lot of students. I do want to hear from you guys at home as well. If you'd like, send us a word or phrase about something that you enjoyed about the past year. If you want to do that, again, you can go to slido.com and use the event code education, or you can leave a comment in the chat box. I want to throw this to the panelists though too. What were some bright spots for you? Ulana, we'll start with you.
So one of my bright spots is last year, when everything shut down, there wasn't a lot of guidance from administrators. We were all figuring out what to do. And I immediately started thinking of my Black and Brown students and how to reach them. So for me, it could have been kind of selfish because I immediately started contacting families and I want to see you every single day. And families stepped up to the challenge because I had built that relationship in person throughout the school year. And so we set up informal meetings every single day, Saturdays and Sundays, to check in and say, hey, how are you doing? I'm doing okay. How are you doing? You know, having that SEL, like, let's get together, let's sing together, you know, let's talk about, like, what are you stressed out about? You know, because little kids have big feelings too. So that was one thing that was really important to me. And I wanted to carry that through to the next year. And I want to continue to carry that through to the next year, is building those deep relationships with families and students, but also just having times to be like, hold on, let's stop, let's check in, let's talk about this. How are you feeling? Because I see something, your body's doing something, but let's put words to those feelings. And having more moments in the day to stop and talk about that was really important. So learning that about me and myself and my students is stopping more throughout the day, not just during the SEL block time or when someone, you know, has an argument with something else. It's more checks for, like, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? Tell me, you know, and the kids are talking about, like, their emotions, which is great. So I want to continue that. So that was a big bright spot for me.
Oh, great. Yeah, and that kind of echoes, we have an audience response here saying that, you know, we seized opportunities to not focus on deficits. And, you know, just having that clear and open conversation with students was great. So Brittany, what about you? What were some bright spots?
I was able to give one-on-one attention, although sometimes virtually, in ways that I had never been able to before. Because, like you were mentioning, now all of a sudden, students can, you know, pick up their phone, open up the Teams app or whatever, and send me a quick private message saying, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Or, hey, I'm not understanding this assignment. Could you meet with me and explain it? And just like this, we didn't have to schedule transportation. We didn't have to say, oh, well, do you have a ride because there's no late bus anymore? It became so easy all of a sudden to give students extra support with whatever they needed, whether it was something academic, whether it was a question they had about a scholarship application. It just became much easier. And then likewise, when we were operating off the hybrid model, where I had smaller groups of students in person, once we kind of finished our lesson with the whole class for the day, you know, we'd give students at home a screen break, and then I would have maybe 2 or 3 students in my class, and we would work on, like, certain targeted things that they really needed to practice, or we'd play games, or we would just talk and give them a chance to practice their English. So in some ways it was, some kids were getting that one-to-one attention that they never are able to have in a classroom of 25 or 30 kids.
Yeah, that I've heard that from several people through my research for this project. Definitely one of those surprising things that's come out of this. So as we turn to Elijah and Kathleen, I also want to. So I want you to tell me about the bright spots, but I also want to I want you to tell me about, like, what that might have taught you about, you know, the way the status quo was and the way students learn. Did that inform, like, well, maybe we should actually, like, put more energy into trying this different thing when it comes to learning, or that kind of thing? Elijah, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm not sure that I would say I learned anything different, but it definitely reinforced, I think, critical perspectives and mindsets. Like, kids can do anything, and our kids have proven that time and time again throughout the last 18 months or so. We have 4 and 5-year-olds who can navigate Zoom better than most adults I know. Which, if you asked me that in September, I would have said no chance. I think that those are some of the practical pieces that are just, like, clearly evident. And I think the perspective around how we are creatively thinking as adults and as leaders, mindset, or excuse me, change that can actually impact whatever education is and how we sculpt it moving forward. The family engagement piece has been huge. And so I think that it's a two-way street. I think families now have a more thorough understanding of like what a teacher needs to do and what a teacher does do. And I think vice versa for teachers and what families need to do. And it allows us to think about how we equip families to support their students because they are the first, the parents, the caregivers are the first educator that the kid has. And so I think that is really important for us to carry as we get through this pandemic and come out on the other side and think about as we change perspectives. So I think for me, I wouldn't say that anything has changed per se, but it's reinforced mindsets that I think we have to continue to remind ourselves about in order to best support the students.
What about you, Kathleen?
I think two interesting pieces. One is I kept hearing about some of our special needs students with the executive functioning, and those special needs teachers out there, parents know, they lose things, they're not as organized as they need to be. So using Google Classroom, all the information was there. They couldn't lose things. They were organized. Their work was able to be done and passed in. And actually, many of them found success. And one of the best things I heard was between a veteran and a new teacher. And what you usually hear is our younger teachers look up, they're mentored by our veteran teachers. There's so much to learn. And I loved when our veteran teachers let down their guard and said, okay, younger teachers, newer teachers, show me this technology. What's a way to teach this particular lesson? So it's changed the total dynamics, of how we're reaching kids and a younger generation. We're coming to them exactly where they're at. And I also have to say, as a superintendent, it was interesting to be able to take a day and start at 7 in the morning and be able to meet with all your teams, ending up in Salem, meeting with the mayor at the end of the day. This is obviously all virtual, and being totally exhausted by the time the night was done. And I have to tell you, I have loved, and today was one of those days where I walked into the high school in Weymouth. I got to see their CTE programs, kids interacting together, everyone masked, safe distancing, excited to be back in school. I love the opportunity to leave my office and drive to the high school and have a 10-minute drive and a time to think and kind of reboot on this beautiful day. So I'm hoping, although efficiency with time and getting a lot of meetings, et cetera, I love the opportunity of what I saw today, right back to, again, where we left off.
Yeah, for sure. We also have some audience feedback too about these bright spots. One person says, I loved hearing high school students saying that they realized how overschooled they are and plan to bring some of the changes that they made this year into next year. I heard that too from several students about maybe I just won't schedule myself quite as, pack my schedule quite as heavily next year. And another person said that respecting families where they were and easing anxiety helped families. Knowing that there was always support from the administration to make sure that students got what they needed was key. And so I think both of those are really great points to sort of segue into the next section of the program, which is, what's next? When we look forward to the next year, what could or should schools look like and feel like when we go back? Should they be exactly the same way as they were before? I see Ulana shaking her head over there. So, this was also a question I posed to the students. And it was interesting. They had different things that they wanted to, push forward to the next year. But one thing that actually was true throughout was that, they said that they really appreciated this student voice aspect of their day. So let's hear them talk a little bit more about that in this next video.
Teachers should always take the point of view from the kids. Maybe instead of having a class one day, clear the schedule. I know it's not easy, but maybe have a class. Oh, the students talk to us about how they feel about this.
Every day at the start of the class, we they ask us how are our moves from a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5.
And did you like that they did that?
Yeah, because they looked around and see where everybody's at, and if a student was feeling down, they would private chat them in the chat and try to talk to them one-on-one. Just a new thing I noticed, because before the pandemic, it was just you go straight into class and we start the work and just go on with the day.
I would say definitely like frequently check in with students, especially ones with busy households. Give opportunities to talk to counselors and other people who can help them mentally and emotionally. Definitely not stop working, of course, not stop giving out schoolwork and homework, but consider what's going on at home and make sure that that can fit into their schedule.
I think the teachers gave a lot more discretion to the students about what the students wanted and what they needed. They were very interactive in the sense that they would ask students like how to approach a certain topic, what would be the best approach to a certain topic or like lesson. And I think that moving forward, it would be really good for maybe students to help plan the curriculum. I'm not saying like full student involvement, but maybe suggest an idea or two here or there to help make the class move a little like more seamlessly than it did.
Yeah, you could see Declan was pulling back a little bit on his statement there, but a lot of students actually told me that very same thing. I liked that, because everyone was kind of learning by doing, that the teachers were like, so did that work well for you guys? Like, should I try that differently sometime? And it just made them feel like they had a hand in their education. It gave them a little bit more like sense of power in that way. And so, Brittany, how would you say that you incorporated student feedback or even like left space for student voice during this time?
Well, a lot of the things that we did were new to the students and to me. So often we would learn about this new app or this new program, and I would say, okay, that sounds great. And I would tell my students before starting it, I would say, listen, we're going to try something new today. I'm a little freaked out. I don't know how this is going to go, but just be patient with me and we'll get through it. And we try it. And at the end, I would ask them, how did you like this? Did you like this more than the way we did it last time? And get their feedback and then take that into consideration. And then sometimes things would totally blow up in our faces. And I would say, okay, but maybe it's just because that was the first time. Maybe we should try it one more time. And then if it still doesn't work, we'll leave it behind. It was like that learning to use breakout rooms with students, for example. So it was a lot of just getting their input, recognizing when things just were not going to work, but then, also being willing to try things again in just different ways.
What about you, Ulana? Especially with, I guess it would be a slightly different dynamic with the young kids that you're working with. But yeah, I mean, how did that work in your classroom?
So, giving students choice in the afternoon of what centers do you want to work with? What do you have in your home? What do you want to do? Center time is always a big time in our day where there's centers around the classroom. And this time it was what's around your house. And coming back to the screen for small groups. So that's an area of student choice, but also thinking about different things like, do you want to learn about trees or the season? Like, let's do a project. Let's do project-based learning, and let's like take a survey and decide together as a class what's something you are all interested in learning together. So there's student choice there. It looks a little different than older grades, but it's still there and it's still a big part of our day for advocacy, especially at center time and other things. But sometimes I even would ask, was that a fun game? Should we play that again? Did you like playing that? In different ways, not the whole content of the day, but maybe it was a game or a dance move or a dance break or something where they're able to interact. And it was a different way of doing things, but it still worked and students were still able to talk about their day for themselves.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got just a few more minutes left. So I have one last question for all of the panelists. And that is, what do you hope the quote unquote new normal will look like? And what will that require? Like, would it be money, political or personal will, et cetera? So Kathleen, we'll start with you. What's the new normal sort of ideal for you?
I have to say, first of all, I want to be in Brittany and Alana's classes, and Elijah, I want to be in your school. They're very impressed. I'll tell you, I think the new normal, one of the things we are talking about, if you look back last year, there were 10 days given to educators to be prepared for what we were going to be dealing with in the fall, hybrid, remote, et cetera. And when you talk about kids coming back, I hope we're not going to just jump into routines again. I hope we're going to take the time to be flexible, to have check-ins with our kids, to find out how they're coming back to us. Some kids have not been back, if they're coming back in person, for almost a year and a half. So it is going to be a very different year when you open those doors in September. God willing, we're back, like I said, to in-person learning, full in-person learning. But again, I think it's going to be flexible, be a little bit vulnerable, and making sure that we're paying attention to, as we say, to the whole child and their needs.
Great. Elijah, what about you? What's the new normal for you?
Yeah, I think I echo what Kathleen is saying and thinking about the experience of the students, right? And so we have a number of students who have been here, who have been in person, some who have been remote. And so I think we have to live in like what is in front of us and what is their experience in order to adapt to that. The thing that I don't think has changed and that we've spent a lot of time thinking about is all educators need time and they need more time. And whatever we have to do to remove obstacles, create time and space for teachers to problem solve and collaborate and be able to figure out what to do, because they are the ones who are going to do it. They have the capacity. We just have to figure out how to give them the time to do that. And so whether that's like policy, whether that's funding, like I think you can attack it through a variety of avenues. If you put passionate educators who have worked through this situation, they will figure it out, and we just have to give them the time to be able to do that.
Great. Brittany, you're next. What's your new normal look like?
I know that all of us so desperately feel like we've been zoomed out and we need a screen break. But I can't tell you how incredible it has been for me to see, that a student who last year didn't know how to drag something using the mouse on the computer can now create an entire PowerPoint presentation complete with images, all different font sizes. And that sounds like something small, but it's really not, especially when you have students who are coming from areas where they may have never used or seen a computer before they got here. And so I want, technology to remain a priority, not that we need to be, using the computers for the entire lesson, because obviously, as we've learned, that doesn't always benefit all students. But the way that I saw teachers and leaders of our school and of our district prioritizing students and families' access to technology this year, I don't want that to go away. I don't want it to all of a sudden become, okay, well, now we're back in person, so we don't need to make sure that everybody has Wi-Fi at home. We don't need to make sure that every kid has a computer when they start school. I don't want that to change. So that's one of my big things, because it's just, I think it's so empowering for students when they realize they can do all these things on, using technology.
Yeah, that was a big theme that I heard as well. Even parents improving their skills, which was very helpful too. Yeah. Ulana, what about you?
I completely echo what Brittany said. It's so important to continue to make sure that students and families have access to technology. What Kathleen said earlier about virtual IEP meetings or parent conferences improves our family engagement. Having more events that are held virtually for students and families to feel like they are in the classroom is 100% a part of my new normal. And taking time to continue moving into next year for myself is making sure that I'm truly building students' positive sense of self, positive racial identities, more, and focusing on their socialization skills, because that's something that we missed, interacting with each other, having multiple exchange conversations, and learning to play with other students in an authentic way and having authentic experiences, because maybe we weren't able to, go to the grocery store, go to the beach, but we're going to be able to do that now. And maybe they haven't been. I've had families who didn't even leave their home for the entire pandemic. So I want them to have those experiences of what's it like walking around in our community now that we're a little bit safer. So access to technology, I want to keep that. Having virtual conferences and events for families, and making sure our curriculum is still building a positive racial identity for our children and positive identities, and as well as social interactions and play.
Great. All right, well, that brings us right to 7 o'clock, and that means we are out of time. I could talk about this for so much longer if you let me, but Thank you, everyone, for joining us. A big thanks again to our panelists, Kathleen Smith, Interim Superintendent of Weymouth Public Schools, Brittany Jenny, ESL teacher at New Bedford High School, Elijah Hextall, the principal at Dudley Street Neighborhood Charter School, and Ulana Ainsworth, inclusion kindergarten teacher at the Curtis Guile Elementary School in Boston. I also want to give a big thanks to our students, too, who spoke to us in the videos. That was Anjali Ramardi, Lincoln Annabali, Christelle Charles, Declan Collins, and Ismail Mendez. And thank you for spending part of your evening with us. Please join us back here again at City Space on October 21st. We'll be checking back in with our panelists to hear how they and the students have adapted in the new school year. Until then, enjoy the rest of your evening.